Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗧𝗵𝗲 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Izuku's POV. Someone please help me. 82 I looked around for the source of the scream. Just around the corner was a man attacking a small child. There was nobody else around, so I ran to help her. I powered up my quirk to 1% and punched him in the back of the head. 27 Once he was down, the little girl ran away, I'm guessing back to her parents, and I pinned the guy to the ground and held his hands behind his back. He turned his head to look at me and smirked. I grabbed my phone to call 𝗓𝗍𝗔, keeping his hands behind his back. I finished the call and hung up. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳, he grossly said. I didn't answer. After a minute or two I saw 𝗓𝗍𝗔 and a police car pull up. I let go of the guy and let the police take care of him while I talked to 𝗓𝗍𝗔. But after a couple minutes of talking I started feeling dizzy and lightheaded. I guess 𝗓𝗍𝗔 noticed because he started to look worried. Slowly I started losing consciousness and fell to the ground and passed out. At the hospital, what are we going to do? She's going to be heartbroken. I'm not sure, 𝗏𝗏. I slowly open my eyes and adjust to the bright lights when I hear my mom to the side of me. She's awake. 𝗬𝗓. I look over to my mom and 𝗓𝗍𝗔, and my mom is crying while he comforts her. She runs over to me and hugs me, but I feel something on my chest. Once she pulls away I look down and my eyes widen in horror. 60 Mom. What happened to me? I ask in a shaky voice. 12. The guy you attacked apparently has a quirk that swaps a person's gender, and you just so happened to touch him long enough for it to work. I'm so sorry, Izuku. She cried. 170 I stared at her in shock. My vision started to go blurry and soon tears started falling. I cover my face with my hands and sob. Is this permanent? I managed to get out. Why yes. My mom says through her tears. 92 This made me cry even more. My mom comes over to me and tries to comfort me by hugging me. But it doesn't really work. I cry for what seemed like hours. 𝗓𝗍𝗔 eventually left and it was just me and my mom. 23 How about tomorrow we go get you some new clothes since yours won't fit you right anymore? She asked me. 22 Sure. She gave me a sad face and hugged me. Hey, everything's going to be alright. She looked me in the eyes. 3 I just nodded my head. I was still in shock from what happened. I just sat there and played with my now shoulder-length hair. What if everyone at school makes fun of me? That got me scared. Hopefully I won't see anyone I know tomorrow. I laid down on the bed and soon the drowsiness took over my body and I fell asleep. 41 The next day I woke up and my mom had brought me some clothes to wear since I was still in the hospital gown. I changes into a pair of jeans, a loose white shirt, and a green jacket to cover my bub, but it didn't really work. My jeans were too loose on my since I had a smaller waist now, but there was nothing I could do about it. 50 My mom checked me out of the hospital and we headed to the mall. Once we got there my mom immediately dragged me into some stores and we started looking through clothes. I was looking at some near the entrance of the store when I saw Momo, Mina, Tsu, and Ochako walk into the store. 23 I quickly panicked and pulled my hood over my head and ran back to my mom. She looked confused for a second, but when she saw them she understood and kept looking through clothes. After a minute or two my mom pulled me over to the dressing rooms and handed me a pile of clothes to try on. Unfortunately she also wanted me to come out and model them for her. 11 I tried on a couple outfits and showed her, but after about my third outfit, myheroacademia, I froze. 33 I quickly turned to where the voice came from and I saw Momo and Mina standing there looking at me. My face became flustered and I ran back into the dressing room and locked the door. I heard talking going on from outside, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. About a minute or two later I heard a soft knock on the door. Myheroacademia, please come out. Your mom explained to us what happened and just know we don't hate you. I heard Momo's voice and next Mina spoke. 22 We're still your friends and we would never abandon you. 10 I slowly started to open the door. 17 Really? I asked. Yes. They both said. I opened the door the rest of the way and hugged them, and they hugged me back quickly. Just then I saw Tsu and Ochako walk into the dressing room with some clothes in their hand when they saw me and the other two. We explained to them what happened, and they reacted the same way Momo and Mina did. They decided to help me pick out some clothes, and they picked some that I would feel comfortable in since I'm still not used to being a girl. For my mom went home and left me with the rest of them, which I was okay with. When we walked out of that store, I looked off in the distance and saw the rest of the class at the food court. 49, oh no, oh number 19. I quickly turned and hid behind the other girls. Once they saw what I was looking at, they turned to me and smiled. 6, hey, it's gonna be okay. Momo said. 10, yeah, we'll tell them what happened at you want us to. Uraraka told me. 7, I nodded. 1, okay then. We started walking over there, and I still hid behind them as we walked. Hey guys. I heard Kirishima say to them. Everyone was in a small group, so it wasn't that hard to get their attention. Guys, I would like to introduce you to our new Midoriya. Momo said. 17. The 4 of them moved out of the way so everybody else could see me. I just stood there awkwardly and waved. Everyone's jaw dropped. I felt my face become flustered, and everyone started asking questions rapidly, and it started to overwhelm me. I guess Momo noticed this because she calmed everyone down. Okay, calm down. She started to tell everyone what happened while they all sat there shocked. I thought she was done, but she wasn't. And now we're gonna let her change, and we can witness the real new Midoriya. 13. What? I yelled. This wasn't a part of the plan. I was still in the clothes my mom had brought me. The 4 of them grabbed me and pulled me into the bathroom. They handed me an outfit and pushed me into one of the biggest stalls and made me change. I put on black high-waisted shorts, a green tank top, and a matching green cardigan. I also put on my new red shoes I got, which had a bit of a heel to it. 70. I came out to show the girls, and they stared in awe. You look appealing. Momo told me. 9. Thanks. 2. Now let's go show everybody else. Mina yelled. 2. Huh. Mina and Uraraka went out first and announced that I was coming out. I was embarrassed and really didn't want to come out, but Momo and Tsu pushed me out in front of everyone. I heard gasps come from everyone around me, and I looked up and everyone was staring at me. It was really embarrassing, and I could feel heat rise up to my cheeks, and I'm sure my face was flushed red. 23. I stood there frozen for what seemed like forever. I got too embarrassed and ran back into the bathroom and locked myself in one of the stalls. My vision started to become blurry, and soon I started to cry. I heard someone come in and they knocked on the stall. 1. Midoriya. It was Momo. 2. Go away. I said. 5. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry. I didn't know this would happen. 3. It's okay. Jay, just give me a couple minutes. 6. Okay. I heard her walk out. 1. I honestly didn't want to leave the bathroom. I wanted to hide and never show my face again. I was so embarrassed. Eventually, though, I stopped crying and wiped the tears from my eyes. 5. I came out of the stall and looked in the mirror, and my eyes were red and puffy. I tried to use a bit of water to make the puffiness go down, and it helped a little bit, but not much. Finally, I came out of the bathroom and everyone was gone, and all I saw was Momo and Kaken left. Once Momo saw me, she ran to me and wrapped her arms around my small body. I'm so sorry. She apologized, and I hugged her back. It's okay. You didn't know. I know, but still. We pulled away and smiled. Where did everyone else go? I asked. She was about to answer before she got cut off. They left. Kaken came up behind her and said. 3. Oh. Well, not all of them. Some are still around the mall. Momo said and turned to look at him. Teach. We heard a buzz and Momo checked her phone. Sorry guys, I got to go. My mom wants me home. She said and turned to leave. Bye. I yelled to her and she turned and waved, then left. Now I was alone with Kaken. This will be interesting. Once Momo left, it was a little awkward between me and Kaken. Until he started the conversation. So. 2. How is being a girl now? He asked me and gestured me to walk with him. 37. Well, I definitely don't like it, but I'm gonna have to get used to it because it's permanent. He nodded, listening, so I continued. It's been okay so far, but just awkward with everybody staring at me because of it. I mean, I'm still the same person and nothing's changed except for I'm just a girl now. Sorry, I ranted a little there. I blushed and put my head down. 10. This was the first time I was having an actual conversation with 𝗂𝐽 and I wasn't letting this opportunity go. 12. It's fine. He simply said. I couldn't imagine what it would be like. You know what's weird though? What? I looked at him. It feels like I can talk to you more like this, he admitted, and his cheeks turned a light pink. 69. I giggled a little bit. Huh? What are you laughing at, you diamond nerd? He yelled as we walked out of the mall and I turned to him. Nothing, it's just I feel the same way. I smiled and his cheeks turned a deep red. 25. You diamond nerd. He looked away and mumbled under his breath. We started walking again towards my place. It was silent for most of the way until I asked something that's been on my mind this whole time. How come you're being nice and not bullying me for once? 29. He stopped in his tracks and I turned to look at him. You know, I'm not sure myself actually. But don't get used to it. He started walking again. 6. I sighed. What? He asked. It's nice to be able to talk to you like this. Without you yelling at me all the time. I said sadly. 3. He sighed. Look, I'm sorry. 40. I looked up at him and he had his head down. 1. I'm sorry for bullying you. The truth is I want our friendship back. Like the way it used to be. 48. I was stunned. I didn't expect any of this, especially from him. He looked at me and gave a soft smile. I smiled in return and we continued walking to my place and we talked and laughed on the way there. 28. Once we got there I was about to go inside when he hugged me. Surprised I didn't hug back right away, but I eventually wrapped my arms back around him. 8. We let go and then he did something even more unexpected. He kissed me. Well, he kissed me on the cheek and turned around then left. I stood there shocked with my face flustered for what seemed like forever. 88. I have actually liked 𝗂𝐽 for a while now but was always too scared to say anything. Could he like me back? No, of course he doesn't. He couldn't possibly like an idiot like me. 40. Or could he? The next day was Monday and my alarm went off, so I hit it hoping for it to turn off, and it did. I slowly got up and took a nice cool shower to wake myself up. 2. Once I get out I wrap the towel around my body and dry my hair and fix it and do everything else I need to. I walked to my room and put on my uniform, which now consisted of a skirt and tights. Looking at myself in the mirror, I hate what I see. All I see now is a small fragile girl who gets hurt at the smallest things. 50. Izuku. My mother called from the door of my room. I turned to her with a frown, but she didn't pay attention to that. She just stood there smiling with stars in her eyes looking at me. I turned back around to grab my bag and walked out past her, and I felt her eyes following me down the hallway. 2. I got to the door and slid on my shoes and walked out without saying bye or eating breakfast. It's okay, I always knew my mom wanted a girl instead. And now she has her wish. 88. I walked down the street alone watching the cars pass by when I felt a tug on my backpack. Once I got my balance back I looked behind me and saw 𝗂𝐽. What was he doing here? I mean, obviously on his way to school, but why with me? What's wrong, you diamond nerd? He asked. Wanta. Don't tell me, I know you're upset, I can tell. He said as we walked. 17. I sighed. It's my mom. By the way she looks at me you can tell she's happier with me like this. I mean, I always knew she wanted a daughter instead, but I just don't know. At least she got her wish, I guess. I looked down with tears filling my eyes but not falling yet. We stopped walking but I didn't look up. Hey! He said in a soft voice and lifted up my chin. 40. The tears started rolling down my cheeks as I stared up at his face. He looked like he felt bad for me. Though I hated people doing that. I moved away and turned the other way trying to conceal my tears, but they just kept flowing. He quickly turned me back around and wrapped his arms around me. This time I couldn't move away. 7. We stood there for a while holding on to each other as I cried. After a while I finally calmed down and I realized we were late to school. Oh no. We need to go. I told him as I checked my phone. Nope. We're not going. He grabbed my hand and started walking the other way. But I tried to resist but he wouldn't let me. But nothing. We're skipping today and I'm gonna make you feel better. He pressed on. 84. I finally gave in and walked alongside him. I sighed. My mom's gonna kill me. It's fine. I'll talk to her. 11 We walked for a while and my hand started to become uncomfortable the way he was holding it. So I slipped my hand out of his grasp and intertwined our fingers. I became a flustered mess. 6 Soon we turned the corner and I saw we were heading in the direction of my apartment. I guess it was fine since my mom was at work and wouldn't be back till around nighttime. We got up to my door and I untangled our hands and instantly missed the warmth. I got my key out of my bag and unlocked the door and we walked inside to the empty house. We slid off our shoes and took off our bags and sat them by the door. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed some snacks for us and we headed to my bedroom. While turning on my TV, we sat on the bed and sat back against the wall. After a couple of minutes of scrolling through channels, 𝗂𝐿 put his arm around my waist. Heat rose to my cheeks and I'm pretty sure I was a flustered mess. When I relaxed, I scooted closer to him and leaned on his shoulder. 23 This will be interesting. Izuku's POV. We sat there for hours watching movies in silence. Well, that was until I started to get sleepy. I tried my hardest to keep my eyes open and watch the movie, but my vision started to go dark and I fell asleep. 1 Bakugo's POV. I heard soft snores and I looked down and saw that she had fallen asleep on my shoulder. I softly smiled to myself. Slowly I started to reposition us to where we were lying down with her lying on my chest and my arms around her. It wasn't long till I also fell asleep. 𝗏𝗏's POV. I was at work and I got a call from the school saying that Izuku never showed up. Now I'm on my way home to make sure he's okay. 30 I pulled up to the apartments and hurried up to the door and ran inside. Izuku. I called out. No response. I called out for her again but still no response. I hurried up to his room and opened the door. 6 It was empty. I woke up to being roughly pulled out of a van. I struggled and trashed around trying to get away, but I couldn't get out of their grasp. I tried to use my quirk to blow them away, but it wasn't working. 15 I didn't know where I was. I was being dragged somewhere by who knows, and I couldn't use my quirk to get away. I looked around and trying to find out where I was, and then I heard a voice. Let go of me, you 𝗵𝗃𝗲. I looked to where the voice came from and my eyes widened in disbelief. 𝗂𝐿. I said under my breath. I watched him as he thrashed around and tried to attack the person holding him, but he couldn't. It was hard to watch and my eyes started to water and I started crying. 𝗂𝐿. I yelled for him and started thrashing around again. He heard me and looked up and his eyes widened in surprise. I guess seeing me tied up and being dragged away made him angry. Actually not angry, but livid. 12 He struggled to get away even more and I could see his eyes tearing up. They started pulling him in the opposite direction and we both thrashed and struggled trying to get away, but it was no use. Stop struggling. I heard a voice say. I was hit with something hard to the head and passed out. 6 When I woke up, all I felt was the coldness of the hard ground. I sat up freezing and tried to look around, but my vision was a little hazy. Once it focused, I could tell that I was in a cell. Looking around, I looked to my right and saw 𝗂𝐿. He was sitting upright against the wall but unconscious. I looked at him for a moment and realized his head was bleeding. I'm guessing he was hit in the head too, but harder than me. I still had on my school outfit, so I pulled off my jacket and tore off a part of the sleeve of my shirt and wrapped it around his head to stop the bleeding. 10 Quickly I put my jacket back on to help the cold, but it didn't do much. It also didn't help that I was wearing a short skirt with thin tights. I thought about it for a minute and then I decided to sit next to 𝗂𝐿 till he wakes up. I'm not sure how long that will be since he was hit harder than me. I scooted closer to him and laid my head on his shoulder. It was only a couple minutes till he woke up. I could feel his body under me become tense. Lifting my head, I looked at him. He looked around for a second, taking it in, and then he looked down at me. Realizing it was me, he quickly hugged me. I was a little surprised but quickly hugged back. 3 Where are we? He asked. I'm not sure. I replied. Then we heard the door open and someone stepped inside. Well, I have the answer to that. We looked to where the voice came from and saw a man with baby blue hair and severely dried skin. His beady red eyes that could kill. 6 Shigaraki. 48 My eyes widened in fear and I backed up against the wall, frightened. 𝗂𝐿 noticed this and stood on his feet in front of me in defense. Oh, there'll be no need for that, Jillian, he said. 31 Someone else walked through the door and I had never seen them before. They had long curly black hair and purple eyes. She wore a long-sleeve black dress that went down to her knees, and under that she wore black stilettos. Immediately when she walked in, 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 was thrown against the wall right beside me and I was thrown to the other side of the room. I couldn't move, but I could see that Shigaraki had 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 up against the wall and he had chained him to it. They cuffs looked different than regular ones though. Your turn. He turned to me and smirked. Him and the girl started walking towards me and she used her quirk to throw me up against the same wall 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 was chained up to, and I was only a couple feet away from him. He chained me up and stepped back. Isn't this nice? 2 of the best students at UA right in the palm of my hand. He leaned down and caressed my face with his rough hand. You're a pretty one, aren't you? 24, get your hands off of her. 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 struggled against the chains, but it was no use. 7 I moved my face away from him as best as I could. I felt like I was about to cry. He looked at 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 for a moment and stood back up and walked out with the lady without another word. 10 It was hours before anyone returned to our cell. And this time it was even worse than before. Himiko Toga 6 She walked into our cell and looked at us for a moment and then smiled her evil little smile. 1 We got lucky this time, didn't we? We didn't answer. This'll be fun. She walked over to me and sat on top of my legs and got close to my face. I've never done things with a girl before. But I guess there's a first time for everything. She took out a knife and lifted up my chin with it to look at her. Isn't that right, Izuku baby? She smirked. 28 I started shaking in fear and I held back a cry, but that didn't stop my vision from fogging up. It wasn't long before tears rolled down my cheeks and I'm pretty sure my face was red as hell. 27 Get away from her, 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 said in a low, dangerous voice. Huh. She looked over at him and smirked. What are you gonna do about it? As of right now you're as helpless as a child. 12 Touch her and you'll regret it. He growled. Oh, you mean like this? She put her hand on my thigh and slowly started moving it upwards. This made him struggle against the chains again, trying to get away. 15 You could tell she was having fun teasing him like this. I could feel myself shaking and crying. I tried to pull away from her, but it was no use. 6 She kept moving her hand upward until she reached the top of my thigh. Slowly she started moving her hand towards my inner thigh and I closed my legs as best as I could. 1 Now don't be like that, she said and slowly climbed off of me, but it wouldn't be for long. 2 She slid my shoes off and threw them across the room. Slowly, while looking me in the eyes the whole time, she started pulling my tights off. This made me even more frightened about what she would do to me, and it made me start crying even more. 22 Once she pulled them off, she climbed back on top of me and slid her hands under my skirt. I looked over to 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 with a pleading look, but I knew he couldn't do anything. I felt her hands reach the top of my thighs and slowly slid them in between my thighs. Get the hell away from her, you 𝐵. 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 yelled, but it was no use. 6 She slowly started to rub me through my underwear. It didn't feel good, it felt horrible. I tried squeezing my legs closed, but it didn't help. I could hear chains rattling and I assumed it was 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 trying to get out. 7 She eventually moved my underwear aside and stuck her fingers inside me. It hurt so badly. I cried even more and started breathing heavily. This went on for what seemed like hours. And when I wouldn't cooperate, she would cut me. 32 I screamed and begged for her to stop, but she didn't. The whole time 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 struggled against the chains to save me from her, but it didn't work. Please stop. Managed to get out. Fine. But before I go, she smirked. She stood up in front of me and held her blade in her hand, pointing it towards me. My eyes went wide with fear and I was shaking. No. He screamed, but it was too late. She sliced my cheek open and I screamed in pain and cried. That was a delightful scream, my dear. Let's hear it some more. She smiled evilly, for she kept cutting my skin and all I could do was scream and scream. She also swung her leg and kicked me in the face where the cut was, and it opened even more. 6 But she didn't stop there. She kicked me in the sides, stomach, legs, basically anywhere you could think of. By the end of it I had cuts and bruises along my face, arms, and legs. When she finally left I could barely sit up. The only thing holding me up was the chains. I couldn't even sit up. The chains were the only thing keeping me from falling to the floor. Then once again the door opened. I couldn't see them, but I could hear the clicking of heels against the stone floor. Whoever it was had unchained me and let me to the floor gently. Slowly I opened my eyes and I saw the same girl from earlier. 𝗬𝗧𝗵𝗲. I managed to get out. She put her finger against her lips, shushing me. You need to save your strength. My name's Jillian. I may be a villain, but I'm not heartless. I just follow orders, but other than that I do what I want. And why should we trust you? 𝗂𝐽 said. I'm not expecting you to. But just know I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm on your side. I don't believe you. Fine then. If I wasn't on your side, would I do this? She got up and walked over to him and unlocked his chains. He rubbed his wrist and looked up at her and nodded. Well, thanks. He quickly got up and walked over to me and sat down beside me. Are you okay? He asked, worried. For what? I stuttered. He caresses my cheek with a worried look on his face. You're not fine. Don't lie to me. I looked away from him and tears welled up in my eyes. Hey, it's okay. I'm here. He said in a soft voice and turned my face back towards him. I gathered up all my strength and sat up quickly, wrapping my arms around him. I cried into his shoulder and he wrapped his arms around me protectively and held me. I heard the clicking of heels walking out of the room, and after a minute she came back in. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder and I turned around and looked at her. She started talking in a soft voice. Hey, we need to get you patched up. She softly smiled. I nodded and pulled away from 𝗂𝐽. I tried to stay sitting up, but I got dizzy and fell back towards the ground, but I didn't hit it. I felt a hand on the back of my head and they slowly lowered me into their lap. Opening my eyes slowly, I saw that I was in 𝗂𝐽's lap. He had his hands on the sides of my face, keeping me steady. I looked over at Jillian and she had a first aid kit at her hands and I let her go to work. She bandaged up my arms, legs, and my face while I laid there. I'm sorry about what Toga did to you. But I guess it's good that now she's banned from coming back in here. She tried to lighten the mood. She is? I asked, confused. Yeah, wasn't supposed to hurt you. Hell, she wasn't even supposed to be in here. She said angrily. Wow. I said. Well, don't let that beach back in here. 𝗂𝐽 said, livid. Trust me, I'm not. Good, but why are you helping us? I asked. Because you don't deserve this. Because you don't deserve this. She had a sad look on her face. You're only children and I hate to see this happen to you. So then why are you a villain? 𝗂𝐽 asked. She sighed. The truth is I never wanted to become a villain. My whole family is in the villain league and I just could never escape, so I gave up trying. I've always dreamed of becoming a hero and using my quirk for good, but I'll never get the chance to. Wait, how old are you? I asked. 16, she looked down. You could escape with us and come to UA. I'm sure they would let you. Hold on a second. How do we know we can trust you? 𝗂𝐽 said, but this time he wasn't angry. I don't expect you to. She said sadly, but I want to at least get out of here and run away from this place. Fine, we'll help you. He said. Really? She looked up surprised. Yep. I looked up at him and he had a determined look on his face. I'll be right back, she said and walked out. Me and 𝗂𝐽 talked about the situation until she came back. She walked in carrying 2 steaming bowls. Do you think you can sit up? She asked me. I can try. 𝗂𝐽 helped me sit up and I felt a slight dizziness, but other than that I was fine. She gave each one of us a bowl of steaming hot soup. Thank you, I said. You're welcome. I can't just let you starve. Technically I'm supposed to, but I'm not letting that happen to my friends. I was taken back a bit. Friends? I couldn't believe she wanted to be friends with us. But besides all that, I smiled and nodded and started eating. For the soup was pretty good, but there was a question I was dying to ask. Sorry if this is rude, but can you tell us about your quirk? I asked her, a little embarrassed. Oh sure. I actually have 2 quirks. One of them is called gravity. I can set a point where I can make a gravitational force and pull someone towards it. I can only do 1 person per force though. My other quirk is called spider. I can summon big or small spiders as my minions. I can also shoot spider web and cocoon my prey in it. 16, that's so cool. I said excited. Thanks. I don't really like my gravity quirk since it's the one I use most being a villain. That's why if I become a hero I want my hero name to be 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗓. 17 We started going on about quirks while 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏 sat there and just listened. Eventually she demonstrated her quirk by summoning a small spider. Wow. Yep, she's my favorite spider and the strongest when she's larger. Her name is Charlotte. Wanna hold her? 37 I was a little resentful. I never really liked spiders. Oh come on. She doesn't bite unless I order her to. Okay. I stuttered. I held my hands out and she put Charlotte in my hands. I pulled my hands back towards me and she started climbing up my arm. After a couple seconds she had reached my shoulder and sat there. Oh, I said. I took one of my fingers and petted her on the head. We talked for what seemed like forever until we heard the door open once again. Izuku's POV Shigaraki, Jillian. What are you doing in here? Oh. She had to think of something quick. I was just interrogating them for information. Then why are they off of their chains? He pointed towards the wall with the empty chains. Because after Toga was in here we didn't want them to die, did we? So I had to patch him up and he helped me. It was a lame excuse for Shigaraki. But it wasn't far from the truth. Well, get them back on their chains and don't let them off again. He yelled. Yes, sir. She looked down. She went to me first and put me back on the chains. As she was getting 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏, Shigaraki walked over to me. He put his finger under my chin and lifted my chin up to look at him. I'll have my fun with you later. He smirked. 39 That was a bad choice. Before I could process what happened, Shigaraki was on the ground unconscious and 𝗓𝗏𝗏 was above him with his hands sparking. 9 Jillian. He pointed towards me and she ran over to me and unlocked the chains once again. We ran out of the cell and we entered what looked like a bar. Thankfully it was empty. We ran towards the door and it had about 4 locks on it and they were all locked and the keys were nowhere to be seen. Of course it's not that easy, I said. Right after I said that the roof exploded into pieces and fell to the ground. We looked up and saw none other than All Might. Beside him were other pro heroes like Mr. Aizawa and Present Mike. 3, or maybe it is. I said. 9 They jumped down into the building and saw us. Their eyes went wide with surprise. What happened? Mr. Aizawa asked. No time. I said. Shigaraki is in there. I pointed to the door. We'll explain later. Fine with me. Aizawa and Present Mike ran over to the door and opened it, going inside. A minute later they came out holding an unconscious Shigaraki on their arms. Let's get out of here, All Might said. He knocked down the door and we were about to walk out, but in front of us were Dabi and Toga. I could feel the tension rise and I looked over at 𝗓𝗏𝗏 and he looked like he was about to murder. Izuku dear, where do you think you're going? She smiled evilly. Didn't you have fun during our little playtime? 1 What is she talking about? All Might and the other pro heroes looked at me. 1 I couldn't help but start shaking and my eyes teared up. 𝗓𝗏𝗏 stepped in front of me. Get the F out of here, Beach, or else you'll regret it. He held his hand up and started making tiny explosions. Plus, oh, and what are you gonna do? 2 Blow your F brains out is what I'm gonna do. 20 He attacked. 27 He went in and tried to explode her, but Dabi stepped in front of her and tried to stop him, but 𝗓𝗏𝗏 has the fastest reflexes I've ever seen. 1 Dabi put up his hand to try and burn him, but 𝗓𝗏𝗏 was faster and swung around and kicked him in the face. This knocked him and Toga down. Get off of me. Toga tried to push him off and eventually succeeded in doing so. She stood up with her knife in hand and charged for me. She passed 𝗓𝗏𝗏, but he grabbed her from behind and she swung her elbow around, almost hitting him in the face. He grabbed her elbow and she smirked. 1 Quickly swinging her other arm around, she stabbed him in the side. He yelled in pain. 𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏! I screamed. 2 He let go of her to hold his side in pain. But quickly regretting that he tried to grab her again, but she was already out of his grasp and running for me again. At this point Eraserhead and Present Mike started fighting, but they were too busy fighting Dabi and I had no clue where All Might was. 16 She made it in front of me and started swinging at my face, but I quickly dodged, but she kept swinging. She cut me a couple times, but they were only minor injuries. Unfortunately, I tripped over something and fell back, and before I knew it she was on top of me. 𝗕𝗂𝘁𝗵𝗲 yelled for me. Toga started laughing maniacally and slowly raised the knife above her head. Oh Izuku, you really thought you could leave this place alive, didn't you? Well, you thought wrong. She swung the knife down and plunged it into my stomach. Blood shot from my mouth and I tried to scream but couldn't. 21, no. I heard someone scream. Then instantly Toga was pulled off of me and thrown into the wall. This knocked her unconscious and fell to the ground. He ran over to me and put his hand over where she stabbed me and lifted my head a little with his free hand. Stay with me, please. I can't lose you. He started crying. 13. I put my hand on his cheek. It's okay. I'm gonna be fine. Tears fell down my cheeks. We're gonna be fine. At that moment Aizawa and Present Mike ran into the room and saw us, but they just stood there. What are you doing? Help me. Kaken yelled at them. They didn't move. They stood there and stared at the scene in front of them. 18. I pulled Kaken's face back towards me to make him look at me. I smiled a bit. Plus, I love you, Kaken. 14. Then I blacked out. 11. Bakugo's POV, I love you, Kaken. Her hand fell from my cheek to the ground. Those were her last words before she blacked out. No. I yelled, wake up, please. I put my fingers against her neck to check her pulse. I didn't feel a pulse. No. I yelled, she's not breathing. I yelled to them. 6. They ran over and checked to make sure and she didn't. Their eyes went wide. 2. I picked her up and we ran out of the building and called an ambulance. Moments later they arrived and brought her into the ambulance. I rode with them to the hospital and held her hand the whole way there. Once we were there they rushed her into the emergency room and I was left in the waiting room not being able to do a thing. That was until one of the nurses noticed I was bleeding. That's when I felt a sharp pain in my side and fell to my knee. I clenched it in pain. Right then I got dizzy and fell to the ground unconscious. When I woke up I was blinded by a bright light. Slowly opening my eyes I looked around to see where I was, and I was in a hospital room. I looked beside me and saw my mom and Inko. They looked horrible. Mitsuki. My mom looked up and saw me awake. She jolted up and ran over and hugged me. I didn't hug back just because I couldn't. Then my mind went to Deku and I quickly sat up feeling a sharp pain in my side. Where is she? Izuku. Right now she's still in surgery. Her mom looked down. This settled my nerves a bit and I carefully sat back to not hurt myself again. Inko looked over to my mom and nodded and my mom nodded back. I became confused. Katsuki, well, she stuttered. What is it? Is there something wrong with her? This made me sit up quickly again. Inko took a deep breath. The doctor said there was a 25% chance she would live. Her voice cracked and she started crying. 14. My eyes went wide. My vision started to go blurry. No. I felt the tears streaming down my cheeks as they fell onto the hospital blanket. 2. The knife wound pierced one of her major organs and she may not live. Inko said through her tears. Just then there was a knock on the door and 2 doctors came in. One was a man and the other was a woman. The woman walked over and got me to lay back as she started to check my wound. I didn't resist. I was still shocked about Izuku. As she started checking it, the other doctor asked Inko to step outside to talk. Minutes later she came in wide-eyed, shaking and crying. The nurse was still examining my wounds. She's hour of surgery. 2. I sat up quickly, once again hurting myself in the process. Sir, I'm gonna need you to lay back down. The nurse said. I ignored her. How is she? She just stared at me in horror and shook her head. No. Bakugo's POV, no. What room? Last room at the end of the hall. She knew what I was gonna do, so she didn't try to stop me. I threw the covers aside, startling the nurse, and jumped up from the bed. Throwing open the door, I ran out of the room into the hallway. Sir. I heard the nurse behind me as I ran down the hallway, but I ignored her. I heard the clapping of multiple feet behind me and assumed there were other doctors chasing after me, but I was faster. For as I reached the end of the hallway I threw open the door, and there she lay. Pale and cold. I quickly walked in and shut the door and made sure they couldn't get in. Slowly I walked over to her bedside, and just seeing her laying there brought me to tears. I fell to my knees with my head in my hands and sobbed. After a minute I grabbed her hand and laid my head against the bed. "Please wake up, nothing, please," I yelled, but still nothing. "Don't leave me like this." 13 I looked up at her, but she still had the same cold, lifeless face. Standing up I just looked at her. She was appealing as always. Those freckles that lined her cheeks perfectly. The way her hair fell gently by her side. Too, but now that was gone. I would never see her eyes sparkle in the sunlight when she was happy again. Her mother would never see her daughter walk through the halls of her home again, but instead just an empty house. Her friends wouldn't see her when they walk into the classroom in her desk writing in her notebook about pro heroes, but instead an empty desk they look over at during the middle of wishing it was vacant. 6 I sat on the edge of the bed holding her hand in mine and sobbed. Doctors were pounding on the door begging to be let in, but I ignored them. After minutes of sitting there, the door swung open to reveal about 10 doctors standing there. A couple ran into the room but stopped when they saw me just sitting on the bed beside her. "Sir, we need to take you back to your room to recover," one of the male doctors said. "Leave me alone." "But Sir Dash," I said, "leave me alone." I yelled. This only made me cry more. In the doorway appeared 𝗏𝗏 and my mom. They walked into the room. "We'll handle this," 𝗏𝗏 said to one of the doctors and walked over to me. "Katsuki, look at me." She pulled my face to look at her. "I know it's hard. But right now you need to focus on you." She started tearing up and her voice cracked. "Because we can't lose you two. I'll be damned if I lose more people I care about," she cried. 14 I stood up from the bed and hugged her. She hugged me back quickly and my mom joined in. Once we pulled back I looked down to hide my tears. "Fine, just give me a minute." They nodded and headed out of the room along with the doctors and closed the door. I looked over at her and walked to the side of the bed. "I love you so much. And you'll never know that now. I'm so sorry. I love you." I slowly leaned down over the railing and pressed my lips against hers. They were cold. I pulled away. I stood there for a moment hoping she would wake up. But nothing happened. 20 I knew I had to face the truth that she was gone. So I turned to leave the room and started walking. Until I heard something. 𝐒𝐻𝐁. Bakugo's POV 𝐒𝐻𝐁. 6 My eyes went wide. I quickly turned around and there laid the love of my life awake and breathing. I ran over to her and engulfed her into a hug. I started crying once again and pulled back and held her face in my hands. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting to do this." 2 I pulled our faces together and kissed her. She kissed back and moved one hand to my cheek. I pulled back for air and noticed that she was still weak. 13 Sorry. Heat rose to my cheeks and I looked away. "Hey," she pulled my face back towards her. I liked it. Then she pulled me down for one more short kiss and smiled at me. Then I realized. Her mom. "Hold on," I quickly said and ran out the door. Surprisingly, her and my mom were standing outside the door. When I ran out the door, they looked at me in surprise. "She's awake." Their confused faces quickly turned to surprise and they ran into the room to see her alive. Her mom let out a gasp and ran to her daughter. She hugged her tightly. 3 Mom can't breathe. Deku managed to get out. 7 Her mom pulled back. "Sorry. It's just..." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You're alive." 1 She hugged her again but not as tight and Deku hugged back. They stayed like that for a couple minutes until a doctor walked in and they pulled back. The doctor looked just as surprised to see her awake as 𝗏𝗏 and my mom were. "I'll be right back," he said, and we laughed. 7 We talked about everything as the minutes went by until a different doctor walked through the door. "Since you are now awake, we will be keeping you until tomorrow so you can gather your strength and we can make sure you're okay. But you will need to avoid any physical activity for about a month until your wound heals." 14 Izuku's POV. Hearing this made me so happy. Honestly, I was just happy that I was alive. Once the doctor left, 𝗂𝐻𝐁 sat beside me on my bed and held my hand. A couple minutes went by until I remembered something. I turned to 𝗂𝐻𝐁 with a worried face. "What about your wound?" He looked at me like even he had forgotten about it. Just then you could tell he felt a sharp pain in his side. I sat up a little and made him turn towards me. Slowly I lifted up his shirt and saw blood seeping through his bandages. I quickly turned towards his mom. 5. Go get a doctor, I said. She quickly ran out of the room and moments later doctors ran in. 𝗂𝐻 was put onto a stretcher and rushed out of the room. His mom went to but stopped when she reached the door and turned back to us. I'll let you know what happens. Then she turned and went after the doctors. I turned to my mom with a worried expression, tearing up. Is he gonna be okay? I asked with tears now running down my face. She came over and hugged me. I'm not sure, honey. Izuku's POV. We sat in silence waiting to hear word from Mitsuki, but nothing came for what seemed like hours. Then finally, after hours of silence, Mitsuki walked through the door with a slightly relieved face. He's gonna be okay. The wound just reopened and they had to put more stitches in. I breathed out a sigh of relief, but I knew I wouldn't be able to see him till I was discharged tomorrow. I decided to get some sleep so tomorrow would come faster. I woke up to being blinded by the light coming from outside. I looked around to find my mom awake and sitting by the window looking outside. Mom. She turned to look at me and smiled. Good morning, honey. When am I being discharged? I asked. They said that whenever you wake up they have a few more tests to run and then we can leave. She smiled. I guess that means I should go get the doctor? For she got up and walked out of the room to find a doctor. Moments later she returned with a female doctor. 2. Okay, Miss Izuku. She asked, making sure my name was correct. I nodded. We just need to run a few tests then we'll be done. She said cheerfully. I nodded again. They ran my blood pressure, checked my wound, and changed my bandages. For soon enough they were done and I was finally discharged. I decided to go home and change clothes and fix my hair before I went and saw 𝗂𝐻. And maybe eat something since I was starving. I put on ripped black jeans, an off-the-shoulder green top and my red shoes. While doing my hair I decided to just brush it out and pull it up in a ponytail. 5. I walked downstairs holding my stomach because it did hurt to walk. Walking into the kitchen, even though I was starving, I decided to grab a quick snack because I wanted to see 𝗂𝐻 so badly. 7. Eventually we left the house and headed on our way back to the hospital, and we had already asked Mitsuki what room he was in, so checked in and walked up to the room. I was so excited, but that quickly vanished when we reached the door. I put my hand out to turn the handle, but I couldn't open the door. Is something wrong? My mom asked. I just shook my head and opened the door to see 𝗂𝐻 lying on the bed awake talking to his mother. Both of their heads turned when we opened the door. When we walked in he had looked annoyed, but when he saw me his face turned into a small smile. Mitsuki waved at us and my mother waved back. I just stood there looking at him. I slowly walked over to him and sat on the bed beside him and grabbed his hand. He grabbed mine and held it. We stayed there just looking at each other and holding hands until his mother said something about it. Oh, what's going on here? She gestured to us. 24. I felt heat rise up to my cheeks and I quickly became flustered and covered my face with my free hand. My mom laughed. Mitsuki, don't tease them. Once I finally got myself calmed down and not looking like a tomato anymore, I decided to ask when he would be discharged. The doctor said it would be a couple days before he could leave since his stab wound reopened and they had to put more stitches in. She said with a frown. Oh. Izuku's POV. Oh. I said, frowning. I didn't want him to stay that long. I would be going back to school in a couple of days and I didn't want to be without him. Sure, I had Uraraka and Ida and everyone else, but I still felt alone without him. As the days went by I visited him for as long as I could in the hospital until I had to go home. Sometimes his mom was there with us and sometimes she wasn't. But finally came the day when he was released from the hospital. Me and my mom waited in the front of the building for his mom to check him out. I was so excited I was bouncing around in the front of the building while my mom laughed at me. It wasn't long before I saw them come out through the doors. 5. 𝗂𝐻. I yelled and ran to him. I stopped in front of him and hugged him because I didn't want to jump on him and hurt him, so I didn't hug him too tight. He hugged me back and rested his head on top of mine. Ah, I heard Mitsuki say. 25. Feeling a blush creep up my neck, I buried my head into his chest and he laughed at me. He started running his fingers through my hair and I wanted to stay there even more. 6. Okay, come on, lovebirds. Mitsuki said, so we pulled away and followed. 13 We had decided before that we would all hang out in the Bakugo's house. We were also only taking my mom's car there, so me and 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 walked hand in hand to the car. Me and 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 sat in the back seat together and we were still holding hands the whole way there. Once we got there, we got out and went inside and we headed to his room so he and I could rest some. We laid down on his bed to where he was laying on his back with one arm behind his head and I was laying on his arm on my side with an arm around him. We laid there in the silence for a while just holding on to each other. It was nice. There was finally peace and I couldn't be happier. The next day I had to go back to school and it would be a couple days before 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 was able to go back. I was walking to school and on the way there I would always pass 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏's house. When I was about to pass his house, I saw him standing at the end of his driveway on his phone. 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏, I asked, getting his attention. He put his phone in his pocket and smiled. What are you doing out here? I asked him. Well, I couldn't let you go to school without seeing me, could I? He smirked. I giggled at him. What? He looked annoyed. You wanted to see me? That's cute. I teased him. This made a blush creep up his cheeks and he became flustered. No, he stuttered and looked away. I giggled again. Look, I gotta go to school. I'll bye later and see you, okay? I said and he nodded. See you later. I picked him on the lips and started walking again. I glanced back at him and he stood there flustered. He called after me. UDMN nerd. School was pretty boring as always. Yeah, the only interesting thing that happened was Kaminari and 𝗬𝗪 accidentally got super glued to their seats by Mina. I said. 9 Me and 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏 laughed. I had just gotten out of school and was walking down the sidewalk hand in hand with him to my house. So what happened after that? He asked. Oh, once they tried to get up their pants ripped off and turns out Kaminari wears Pikachu undies. I laughed. 26 We talked and laughed all the way to my house and when we walked in I saw my mom in the living room watching TV. Hey mom. I said when I walked into the door. Hi honey, how was school? She asked me. The usual. I said, we're heading to my room. We walked down the hallway to my room and I opened the door and I realized I had clothes and random junk scattered across the room. I felt a blush creep up to my cheeks. Quickly I ran into the room and started picking up everything and throwing it into the closet. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was this dirty. He just smirked and leaned against the door frame with his arms crossed. Deku didn't even bother to clean for a guest. He teased. Oh hush. I didn't know it was like this. This made me glare at him. He got off of the door frame with that smirk still plastered on his face and walked towards me. He stood right in front of me and put his hands on my hips. This made me blush even more. You know you love me, he said. Two could play at this game. Yes, I do. I leaned up and gave him a quick kiss and went back to cleaning. I took a glance at him and he stood there dumbfounded. I giggled. 13 Once I finished cleaning, he was now sitting on my bed just watching me and I grabbed some clothes from my drawer and walked towards the bathroom. When I reached the door, I turned to 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗏. I'm gonna change. Be right back. He just nodded. I walked into the bathroom and started changing. I changed into a fishnets, a green plaid skirt, and a black t-shirt stuffed into the skirt. I looked at myself in the mirror and hated what I saw. All I saw was a small, fragile girl who couldn't even defend herself against one villain. I could still feel her body on top of mine and her nasty fingers inside of me and her hands all over my body. It was a horrible feeling and it wouldn't go away. I could feel myself tearing up, but I quickly wiped away the tears and put on a fake smile. 13 I walked out of the bathroom and twirled a little. What do you think? I asked. He sat there, eyes wide and mouth open. Once he composed himself, he stood up and walked over to me and once again put his hands on my hips. You look appealing, baby. I blushed at the nickname. 24 He leaned down and connected our lips. It was slow but passionate. Slowly I wrapped my arms around his neck and he pulled me closer. The kiss lasted until we had to pull back for breath. I blushed and looked down but put his fingers under my chin and lifted my head back up to look at him. He gave me one last peck on the lips and then grabbed my hand and started walking towards my door. Can we go to the park? I asked. For sure. We walked to the park, talking and laughing the whole way there. When we finally made it, I let go of his hand and ran over to the swings and hopped on one. "3, push me," I yelled at him. He just smiled and walked over to me. He started pushing me and I started going really high. I was tempted to jump off, but I knew if I did I would get hurt because of my wound. So I slowed down after a few minutes, and once I stopped swinging I felt someone grab onto the chains of the swing above me. Looking up I saw 𝗂𝐿 right above my face. I smiled. This made him turn a light shade of pink. He sighed. "You're gonna kill me with that smile of yours." I giggled. 5 He started to lean in for a kiss, but I stopped him. "You're gonna have to catch me first," I said, and bolted off the swing and started running. 6 I looked back and he stood there dumbfounded before a smirk grew on his face and he started after me. After a couple minutes of running I saw Mina, Siro, Kaminari, and Kirishima in the distance walking into the park. I called after them and they turned and saw me and started walking in my direction as I was running towards them. 2 Hey guys. "Sup," Kaminari said. "What are you doing here?" Mina asked. "I'm here with 𝗂𝐿." I smiled. Their smiles turned into shock. 1 What? They all yelled. Yeah. Right when I said that I felt an arm wrap around my shoulders. "What are you losers doing here?" I looked to the side and it was 𝗂𝐿. 2 I looked back at the others and their jaws were dropped. I gave a questioning look. 1 Mina was the one who spoke up. "So are you two like a thing now?" I nodded. "Well then that explains a lot." Siro said. "Yep," Kirishima nodded. After a moment of silence I got an idea. 3 Why don't we all go out for ice cream? 3 I'm down, Kaminari said. 3 The rest agreed, so we headed into town to the ice cream shop. The whole way there me and 𝗂𝐿 walked hand in hand. Once we got our ice cream we started walking back towards the park. Me and Mina waked ahead talking while the boys followed behind. To get to the park we had to walk past my apartment. As we were walking by I heard a scream. The others heard it too and we all turned our heads towards the apartments. Then another scream rang through the air. I held my breath. Once again we heard a scream. 2 It took me a second, but once I realized where it was coming from I dropped my ice cream and ran towards my apartment. 8 See, I heard 𝗂𝐿 yell but I didn't look back. Instead I ran. I heard footsteps behind me and assumed the others were following. I ran up the steps to my apartment but stopped at the door. I reached out my hand to open the door but stopped. I looked back towards the others who were behind me and put my fingers to my lips to signal them to be quiet. They nodded. I turned back and slowly opened the door. 12 I opened the door and it was empty as far as I could see. Slowly I stepped into the apartment and looked around a little and gestured for the others to come in. "Search the apartment," I said, and they nodded. 1 I ran upstairs to my mother's room and started looking around. I didn't find anything until I saw something laying on her bed. I walked over to the bed and picked up what seemed to be a note. I read it over and almost fell to my knees. My eyes widened and filled with tears. I slowly walked into the living room where everyone had gathered and were talking. When I walked in they all stopped and looked at me. Mina immediately ran over and hugged me. We couldn't find anything but, "Hey, what's wrong?" I couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground crying. 𝗂𝐿 instantly ran over and hugged me. I still had the note but it fell and Mina grabbed it. "What does it say?" 𝗂𝐿 asked. She started reading out loud. "Izuku, I have your mother. If you want to see her again you need to come to the abandoned factory across town tomorrow night at midnight. I will explain everything from there. Your father." 17 She looked at me shocked. In fact everyone did. 𝗧𝗓 was supposed to be dead. For ta, Kaminari said. 2 He was supposed to be dead. I screamed. 3 This made 𝗂𝐿 back away a little. "What do you mean?" he asked. I calmed myself down a little before speaking. When I was born my mom found out that he ran an underground mafia. As I got older he started training me with guns and knives since I was quirkless and I had a real knack for it. I took a deep breath and continued, but he pushed me too hard and eventually started to become violent whenever me or my mom did something wrong. Soon enough he started doing it for the fun of it. Then one day he came home and I had had enough of it, so I stole one of his guns and I 19 𝗂𝐿 pulled me towards him. "Shoo, it's okay," I started crying. You did what you had to, and now he has mom and I don't know what to do. We'll get her back, Kaminari said. 5. Yeah. Zero and Kirishima agreed with him. Mina kneeled down beside me and Kaken. Everything's gonna be fine. We're all here to help you. I looked around and they all had a determined look on their face. I quickly stood up and hugged them all tightly. But then I realized I had to tell them the secret I've been keeping for a long time now. And if I didn't, then there's no way we could save my mom. When I pulled away from the hug and stood back a little. This time I didn't cry. I had already run out of tears to cry. But that didn't stop me from being a nervous wreck. 2. I have something I need to tell you guys. Well, what is it? Kaminari said. I took a deep breath. Ever since I was turned into a girl I'm 5. You're what? Kirishima asked. I'm quirkless. What? They all yelled. Yeah. Ever since I've turned into a girl I've noticed that my quirk doesn't work. It could be because I got it at a later age and it already wasn't fully developed yet. But for the second time in my life, I'm quirkless. I explained. You're joking, right? Please tell me you're joking. Kaminari pleaded. I shook my head. They stood. They're shocked and what looked like fear crossed their faces. But just because I'm quirkless doesn't mean I can't fight. When I walked over to one of the kitchen drawers and opened it, I flipped 𝗬𝗪𝗏 and we heard something from the hallway. How, it still works? Well then, follow me. I smirked. 20. They followed me to the hallway and there was a doorway open that wasn't there before. The doorway revealed a long, dark stairway down. Good thing I grabbed a flashlight in the kitchen. We walked down the staircase a couple floors down and once we reached underground the staircase finally revealed a huge dark room. When I stepped onto the floor I reached out to the side and flipped another 𝗬𝗪𝗏 to turn the lights on. In front of us was a wall filled with rifles, handguns, pistols, switchblades, knives, throwing knives, and all kinds of weapons. On the right side of the room was a shooting range, on the left side of the room were targets for throwing knives and another small room. 9. They all gasped in awe when they saw it. Wow, Kaminari yelled. Do you know how to use all these? He asked and they all looked at me. I nodded. Want me to show you? They nodded quickly. Well then, let me change into something more comfortable first. 2. I walked over to the smaller room in the corner and walked in and closed the door but quickly opened it back. Don't touch anything. I pointed at them and they nodded. 1. I changed into black leather pants, a black long sleeve top with thumb holes in the sleeves, and heeled combat boots. I also put a green pouch with straps around my thigh and a green gun holster around my other thigh. Then I fixed my ponytail and walked out. 14. They all turned to look at me when I walked out and their jaws dropped to the floor. Kaken's face turned a deep shade of red. DM girl. Mina shouted. 2. Holy, my girlfriend's a badass. Maybe even more than me. Kaken said with his hands covering his mouth. 31. I walked over to him and put a finger under his chin. Like what you see. 7. His face turned a deeper shade of red if that was possible. Okay guys, stop flirting. Kirishima said, but seriously Midoriya, let's see what you can do. I nodded. I walked over to the wall of weapons and grabbed throwing knives and put them in the pouch, then I grabbed 2 handguns and held them in my hands. I also grabbed some ammo and quickly loaded the guns. Fun fact, these babies are my favorite out of everything here. I held up the guns. Walking over to the shooting range, the rest followed me and we all put on the soundproof headphones and the shooting glasses. I put one gun in the holster and held the other one up to shoot. I held the gun up to shoot and started shooting. I aimed for the head of the target and hit it every time. Once I ran out of ammo, I quickly switched guns and did the same thing with that one, and by the time I was finished there was a hole in the target. When I turned around and faced the others once I was done shooting and their jaws dropped. Damn, Mina yelled. 6. I love you even more now. Kaken said astounded. 4. Well, I'll show you knife throwing later. Right now we need a plan. I said seriously. 2. I checked my phone in my pocket and it had just become midnight. We have exactly 24 hours until I need to be at the factory. Follow me. I walked over to the smaller room and walked inside while the others followed. There wasn't anything that special about this room. There was only a closet filled with clothes similar to the clothes I was wearing, but behind some clothes in the closet there was a keypad. I put in the code and the back of the closet opened into another room that was about half the size of the larger room. "You're just full of surprises today, aren't you?" Kaminari said. "𝗓𝗵𝗲, I guess I am. Any more surprises we should know of?" Zero asked. "Actually, yes." I smirked. "You've got to be joking," said Kirishima. "Nope. See that?" I pointed to a large map on the wall with what looked like all kinds of tunnels. "That is an underground map of tunnels that lead all throughout the city. And it all starts here." I pressed a button and it opened a small opening in the wall. "Should we even be surprised at this point?" Zero smiled. I thought for a second. "No." I laughed. "Okay, but back to business." I walked to the center of the room where a large table stood with all kinds of maps. There were maps of the city, underground tunnels, and about any map you could think of. We started to come up with a plan to get my mother back. We stayed in there for hours until we had a plan. I checked the time once we were done and it was about 3 in the morning. We had made it up back to the apartment. 1. Okay, go home and get some rest, or I guess stay here and sleep, but we're gonna need our strength. I said. "I'm staying here with you. I'm not letting anything happen to you again." Kaken came over and wrapped his arm around me. "That's fine." I turned to the others. "Sleep over." 1. They all nodded. Zero and Kaminari decided to sleep in the living room while Mina and Kirishima would sleep on the floor in my room. 20. We all laid down to sleep, and even though I was exhausted, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about what would happen with my dad and if we would even get my mom back. But I pushed those thoughts away and eventually fell asleep. Izuku's POV, I woke up to the blinding light coming through my window. Looking around, I realized that my room was empty and I was the only one in. Panicking, I quickly threw the covers aside and ran out of my room. I reached the living room and saw the others sitting on the couch and sighed in relief. "What is it?" Kaken asked me. "Oh, nothing, I just woke up to an empty room and panicked." I said, annoyed, and glared at him. Sorry." I walked to the kitchen and looked back at them. "Hungry?" "Yes," they all replied. I started making breakfast for us, which was gonna be eggs, bacon, and biscuits. I heard someone get up from the living room but didn't bother looking to see who it was. Moments later, I felt hands on my hips and a kiss on my cheek. That's when I looked and realized it was Kaken. "6, need some help?" he asked. "6, please." He started making the eggs and bacon while I made the biscuits. About half an hour later, all the food was done, so we all sat in my dining room to eat. Unfortunately, I didn't really have an appetite because I was still upset about my mom, but I just forced it down because I knew I would need my strength. Over breakfast, everyone was trying to make conversation to lighten the mood, but I didn't feel like talking. Whenever they talked to me, I only gave them one-word replies. Soon enough after we were done eating, everyone else stayed in the living room, but I decided to go down to the training room. I put on black leggings and a black sports bra and my red shoes and headed downstairs. I started throwing knives to try and relieve some stress, which did help to a certain extent. It felt like I was in there for hours. Eventually my arms began to get tired, but I didn't stop. With each one I kept throwing it faster and harder each time. I kept doing this till my arms were burning. I kept pushing myself until I fell to the floor in tears. 11. After a couple minutes of crying, I heard someone walking down the stairs, but I didn't bother moving. Once they got to the bottom of the steps, I heard them run over to me and engulf me in a hug. I slowly looked up to see who it was, and it was Kaken. "Hey, I'm right here." He pulled my face to look at him. "What's wrong?" he asked, worried. "What if we can't save her? What if he's already done something to her?" I cried. "Hey, look at me," he said softly. "Everything's gonna be fine. We're gonna save her and then everything will be peaceful again." 10. No, it's not. Nothing is ever peaceful for me. Ever since I turned into a girl, my life has been hell. I cried even more. 15. Maybe it has been, but you need to stay strong, for everyone around you, for me and for yourself. Because I can't lose you. I don't know what I would do with myself if I lost you. For I didn't say anything, I just sat there and cried. He picked me up bridal style and buried my head in his chest, and he took me upstairs. He carried me up the stairs and to the living room where the others were. When he sat down, he wrapped his arms around me and I snuggled into his chest. The others tried to ask what's wrong, but I never responded, and I'm guessing he shook his head to tell him to stop because they stopped asking. We laid in there for a while in silence. I had become worn out from all of the training, and eventually I fell asleep on Kaken's lap. When I woke up, I looked around to find that I was in the living room alone with Kaken, who was sleeping beside me. I heard talking though and sat up and looked to see that the others were in the dining room talking. I got up and walked over to them, rubbing my eyes sleepily and yawning. "Have a nice nap?" Mina asked me, and I nodded. "What are you guys doing?" I asked. "We were just going over the plans once more to make sure we got it down." Zero said. "That's good. What time is it?" 10:30. My eyes went wide with surprise. "It's that late?" They nodded. I ran over to Kaken and shook him awake. He was reluctant at first but finally sat up. "Everyone to the basement. It's time." For we walked to the basement and everyone changed clothes. Mina wore the same thing I did, but I had the pouch and gun holster around my thigh. We wore black jeans and a black long sleeve top. The boys wore more baggy black jeans and black t-shirts. 47. We went into the back room of the basement and went over the plan one more time, and then it was time to put the plan into motion. I grabbed my 2 handguns and put one into the holster and then put my throwing knives into the pouch. Then we headed out. 8. We drove my mom's car, which was a small black car, but somehow we all fit into it. I let Kaken drive and I was in the passenger seat, and the rest were in the back. It took about half an hour to get to the factory, and by the time we got there it was already 11:50. We got out of the car and looked around, but no one was around. We walked to the entrance of the building and pushed the doors open, but still didn't see anyone. We carefully walked into the middle of the room, and all of a sudden there were lights on us, and we were surrounded. Guns were pointed at us from every angle, and there was no way out. We stood there for a couple moments in fighting position, and I was getting ready to shoot when we heard a voice. Well, what do we have here?" 2. I looked around for where it was coming from but didn't see anyone anywhere. But then I looked up and saw someone on the railing above us. "Dad. Dad," I said, immediately recognizing him. I felt myself tear up at the sight of him, and I resisted the urge to run to him. Even though he was abusive, he's still my dad. But I knew what I had to do. I turned my gun towards him. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that." He smirked. "You know you can't do it." I felt myself start shaking and crying. "I've had enough." I quickly turned around and pushed past everyone and ran to the side of the building and up the stairs. Then I faced him as he stood in the middle of the railing. "You," I said, my voice filled with hate. "You took one of the only things I've loved in a long time." I pointed my gun at him. "Where is she?" 2. "Oh, Izuku, you have no idea how much I've missed you." He smirked. 3. "Don't change the subject. Where is she?" His smirk instantly dropped into a frown. 2. "Why don't you put the gun down and come give your daddy a hug?" 9. "Where is she?" I yelled, now shaking and crying again. 3. "How about this? Put the gun down and come over here and give me a hug, and I'll tell you where she is." He smirked again. He knew I couldn't refuse. Getting to hug my father again and finding out where my mother was. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. I slowly dropped the gun and started to walk over to him. That walk turned into a run. Then it became a sprint with my arms wide open. To be honest, I did miss him. No matter how much he hurt me, he was still my father. I ran to him and wrapped my arms around him tightly and cried into his chest. He wrapped an arm around me. 2. "Can you run?" Kaken yelled. 6. "I'm sorry." My dad whispered into my ear. 2. All of a sudden I felt a sharp pain to my chest. I stumbled back and looked down to see blood spewing from my chest. Looking back up to my dad, he had a smirk on his face and bloody knife in his hand. I fell back towards the ground until someone caught me. I didn't bother looking at who it was. 7. "This is amazing. Now I can take your quirk a lot easier now." He cheered. My eyes went wide. What? You don't think I don't know where you got your quirk from, huh? This is gonna make me a lot of money. Why you but? How could you do this to your own child? I yelled and then coughed up. What do you mean? You are not my child and never have been. He smirked. One eye laughed and his smile dropped. You know, you should really check your facts before you go and do something like this. I laughed. His face was suddenly serious. What do you mean? I don't have a quirk anymore, dumbass. What? Yeah. Ever since I was turned into a girl, I've been quirkless. You've got to be kidding me. Nope. And now since you took the first shot, it's my turn. I quickly grabbed my other gun from its holster and held it up to him. Wait, I cut him off. See you in hell, you son of a bitch. 34 boom Izuku's POV boom. As soon as I shoot, the gun falls from my hand and my arm is right behind it. I almost fall forward to the ground, but someone catches me. I stutter and start crying. We need to save Mom. I look up to the person holding me and see that it was Kaken. But you're hurt. No. I'm fine, I say. No, you're not. I'm not losing you again. I can't. He says, tears welling up in his eyes. Please. No. I'm taking you to a hospital. He helps me stand up. Fine. If you won't help me, then I'll find her myself. I quickly get out of his grasp and start running the other way. I run down the stairs on the other side of the railing and get to ground level. Across the building I see stairs going underground. She must be there. 5 the others were calling my name as I ran, but I didn't stop. I ran down the stairs until I reached the bottom. It was dark and quiet. Suddenly all lights turned on and across the room I saw my mom hanging from chains on the wall like I was before. She was bloody and beaten and unconscious, most likely from my dad. I ran over to her and tried to undo the chains, but they wouldn't come loose. All of a sudden I hear the clapping of heels behind me. Quickly turning around, I saw the one person I thought was on my side. Long time no see. Jillian. 12, what are you doing here? I asked, shaking. That, my friend, is none of your business. She smirked. I'm not your friend. That hurts. Oh, well, I guess there's nothing I can do about it. She said. What happened to her? I asked, not wanting to know the truth. It was your father. Well, he also let me in on the fun as well. I stared at her in horror. By the way, where is he? He's dead. She fake pouted. What a shame. You know, I really liked him. She threw me up against the wall with her quirk and chained me to the wall. 2 memories started flashing through my mind of the time with Toga. I started breathing heavily and crying. I couldn't go through this again. So I did the only thing I thought I could. I screamed. Shut up. Jillian yelled and kicked me in the face. I screamed more. The more I screamed, the more she beat me. But moments later I heard footsteps running down the stairs. I looked up at her and weakly smirked. A second later I saw Kaken and the others behind him. They stared in horror and the scene in front of them. Jillian must have known what was about to happen, so she quickly grabbed me by the throat and held a knife up against it. One more step and she dies. Izuku's POV 1, you piece of 𝐒𝐳𝐻𝑑 Kaken scald. 1. Well, look who we have here. Izuku's little boyfriend and their friends. She held the knife closer to my throat and smirked. Let her go. Kaken yelled. Feisty. 1. He started even more livid and looked like he was about to attack but didn't. I coughed. It's okay, Kaken. I started to cry. I'll be okay. Don't say that. He looked down. You won't be okay and you know that. Why, you're alright. But you see, can't keep getting hurt because of Emmy. I cried. You dumbass. He yelled. I would get hurt over and over again just to see you safe in my arms. He also started to cry. 8. This is precious, but your time is running out. She pressed the knife against my throat harder until it started to bleed and I screamed in pain. I struggled to get my hands from the chains, but it was no use. Just then something grabbed her arm and pulled it. I gently looked to the side and saw Tape pulling her arm. Sir. His Tape pulled her arm away from me and immediately Kaken was in front of us with a dangerous look. 2. Jillian suddenly looked petrified and I understood why. The others came right behind him and grabbed her. While they were dealing with her, Kaken bent down and unchained me. I immediately wrapped my arms around his neck once I was unchained and cried into his shoulder. He picked me up gently and turned to the others. 2. Get Inko and come up. When you're done. I'm calling an ambulance. They each nodded understanding. 𝗂𝐿 carried me up the stairs and to the main part of the building which was abandoned. He sat me down trying to be careful, but I felt a sharp pain in my chest and flinched. "Sorry," he said quietly. It's fine." I stuttered, finding it hard to breathe. I sat there in silence as 𝗂𝐿 called for an ambulance, and once he was done he sat down beside me. 1 moment later we heard the sirens of the ambulance and police cars. Once they arrived they quickly got me onto a stretcher and then put a breathing mask on me. I saw 𝗂𝐿 talking to one of the officers, and after a minute of talking he came into the ambulance and sat beside me. They closed the back doors, and that's the last thing I remember before I passed out. When I woke up I was blinded by a bright light. I slowly looked around and realized I was in a hospital room. To my right there was a small end table with a lamp on it. In front on my there was a shelf against the wall which had a bunch of presents and balloons almost hanging off of it. When I look to my left and see 𝗂𝐿 laying on my bed asleep with his hand in mine. I smile softly to myself with a sigh. I remove my hand from his and run my fingers through his hair. After a couple minutes of doing this he starts to stir. He lifts up his head and looks around for a second until he sees me. When he realizes who it is and that I'm awake and jumps on me and wraps his arms around me tightly. 𝗂𝐿 can't breathe. I stutter. He pulls back. "Sorry." When I put my hand on his cheek, "Hey, it's fine. How long have I been out?" I asked. It's been about a week." I sat there dumbfounded. 9. Wow, wait a second, is my mom okay? I almost yell. "Hey, calm down, she's fine. She's improved greatly since she got here and she's awake and moving around." I breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," he said quickly and looked away. I could sense something was wrong. "Hey, look at me." I put my hand on his cheek and pulled his face towards me. He had tears in his eyes. I looked at him carefully. Tears started rolling down his cheeks and he was trying to hide it, but it wasn't working. I pulled him close and wrapped my arms around him. 3. He finally gave in and wrapped his arms back around me and cried. "Hey, it's okay." I ran my fingers through his hair. "What's going on?" I'm so scared that I'm going to lose you and I can't stand the thought of that. I love you so much. Please don't ever leave me." He cried onto me. 12. I softly smiled and lifted his head up to look at me. "You're not gonna lose me. I promise." 8. He nodded his head and calmed down a little. Now he was just sniffling. He laid in my lap as I played with his hair. Moments later we heard a knock on the door and we looked over as it opened and I saw 𝗵𝘃 helping my mom into the room. 7. 𝗬𝗵. I cried for her. I was about to get up and run to her, but I remembered I couldn't get up since I had a broken leg. But she walked over to me and caressed my cheek with her bruised hand. "I'm so happy you're okay." She cried. "Me too, Mom." I also started crying. She came closer and wrapped her arms around me and I did the same. We stayed there for a couple seconds until we pulled back. She looked around for a second, then looked back at me and smiled. "Looks like you have a bunch of presents to open." I looked over to the shelf happily and my mom sat on the side of my bed while I started opening them. 𝗂𝐿 and 𝗵𝘃 sat on the small couch on the other side of my bed also. There was about 10 balloons with all the presents and I had to guess they were all from my classmates. First I opened a pink and black one that had a pink ribbon on top of it which I assumed was from Uraraka. I opened it and found a charm bracelet with different hero charms on it. I immediately got 𝗂𝐿 to put it on my wrist and I fumbled with the little charms for a couple moments before I went to the next gift. The second one was from Momo and it was some of my favorite chocolates from the store. I quickly ate one. I also got a bunch of other stuff from the rest of my classmates and some just got me balloons, but I didn't care. 5. After I finished opening my presents, a doctor came into the room and said my mom had to go back to her room, so we said our goodbyes and she left with 𝗵𝘃 helping her. After she left, 𝗂𝐿 turned to me and smiled. "I also have a present for you," he said. "Really?" 2. Yep. He took a small black box with a green ribbon tied around out of his pocket and handed it to me. "Open it." 10. I carefully took the small box from and untied the ribbon from it and opened the box. On the inside I found a silver ring shaped like a crown. In the middle was an opal jewel on it. I felt my vision go blurry and I started to tear up. 19. He leaned over and took the box and took the ring out. Grabbing my hand, he slid the ring onto my finger. I started to cry once he put it on my finger, and he came over and wrapped his arms around my tiny figure, and I hugged him back. We held on to each other for a couple moments until we pulled back a little and then connected our lips. It was slow and sweet. While that was happening, we heard a knock on the door and we pulled apart and looked over. When the door opened, we found almost our whole class walking into the room. I smiled and greeted everyone. 3. Well, I see you're getting better, Mano said, smiling. 13. Yeah, I am, I replied. What's that? Mina said and pointed to my ring. Oh, 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 gave it to me. I smiled and held it up for everyone to see. All the girls talked to me about it and how everything was going, while the guys went over to 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 and all talked to him. 5. I see things are going well between you and Bakugo, Uraraka smirked. 4. It really is. All of my friends stayed a little longer to make sure I was okay. We talked and joked around for the longest time until they eventually had to go home. How are you feeling? 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 turned to me and asked. Pretty good. I just want to leave and go home and have everything be good again. That's understandable. We sat in silence for a couple moments until he got up from the seat and came over and sat down beside me on the bed. He reached his hand out and cupped my cheek. Well, the doctor said you'd be able to get out tomorrow. 13. Wait, really? I asked, shocked. Yeah, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but oh well, I guess. He smiled softly. I, however, was overjoyed and smiled big and wide. The next day came quickly and I couldn't be happier. The only bad part is that my mom wasn't being released until a couple more days. Mitsuki had checked me out of the hospital this time and I would stay with them until my mom was released. After I was checked out, we were walking to the car when we heard a loud boom. We quickly turned around and I saw smoke coming from the side of the building. It was coming from the room I was staying in. People were scrambling and screaming to get out of the building. 8. In the corner of my eye, I saw 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 look at me like he knew what I was about to do. I was one step ahead of him though. Before he could react, I was already running back into the entrance of the hospital. For once inside, I looked around for any injured people and I saw a girl about the age of 4 in the corner of the waiting room crying. I ran over to her and picked her up and held her safely in my arms. Once she was in my arms, another explosion rang through the air. Of all the people that had already escaped, I realized I never saw my mom in the midst of them all. I saw 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 run into the building and I called out to him. Once he saw me, he quickly ran over. Another explosion. This time it was getting louder. That meant the explosions were getting closer. We have to get out of here, he yelled over all the people screaming. But I can't leave Mom, I cried. She never made it out. That was when I heard the ticking. 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 apparently heard it too because he looked behind us and saw a bomb sitting on the waiting room desk. I looked at him and down at the girl in my arms. There wasn't enough time to escape. I cried and tried to calm the girl in my arms down while 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 watched it all. No. 3. We need to go now. 2. What? No. 3. We need to go now. 2. 1. Nothing. We waited for a few moments before opening our eyes and looking over towards the bomb. It didn't blow. 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 had wrapped his arms around my body to shield me from it, and I was still holding the little girl in my arms. We stood there for a couple seconds, waiting, listening, but there was nothing. 7. 𝐻𝐻𝗵𝗲 quickly grabbed my hand and we ran out of the building where everyone else was. Once we walked out, Mitsuki ran over and engulfed us into a hug. Thank All Might you're safe. She pulled away and looked down at the little girl in my arms. And who is this? 2. We saved her. She was all alone and nobody else was around her, I said. I sat her down to her feet and she looked up to me, still crying, so I have her a soft smile. I wiped the tears off of her face with my thumb. Hey, calm down, everything's gonna be okay. What's your name? I asked her softly. 𝗬𝗓𝗓𝗓. She stuttered. 3. That's her appealing name. I smiled at her. This was the first time I was actually able to look at her. She had long pastel pink hair and bright golden eyes. Freckles lined her cheeks and the bridge of her nose. She looked awfully skinny and was very pale. Where's your parents? I asked. I don't know. She started to cry more, They left me here. What do you mean? I asked puzzled. They left me here and didn't come back. 14 My eyes went wide. I looked up at 𝗂𝐽. He had the same expression and crouched down to her level. How long have you been by yourself? He asked her. I don't know. But I haven't eaten. I almost cried. She's starving and doesn't have anywhere to go. 2. Okay, let's go get you something to eat, okay? She smiled and nodded. 1 I grabbed her hand and we were about to walk off until I heard someone calling my name in the crowd. Izuku. The voice called. I recognized it. I searched through the crowd for where it was coming from and I finally found it. Mom. I whispered to myself loud enough for 𝗂𝐽 and Hana to hear. Mom. I yelled to her. Once she looked at me and smiled and cried. Running towards me, she held her arms out. She embraced me in a hug and we stood there for a couple moments holding each other in a hug. I'm so glad you're safe. She pulled away and cupped my cheeks in her hands. I thought you were dead. I said, crying, and embraced her in another hug. Once we pulled away again, she looked at the Hana who was now being held by 𝗂𝐽. Who's she? My mom asked. Her name is Hana. I am. We saved her and she was apparently abandoned by her parents. I looked at my mom with a sad face. Now she has nowhere to go. Now she has nowhere to go. I said sadly. Oh, well, why don't you two take care of her? 14 Me and 𝗂𝐽 had the same reaction. Yeah, my mom smiled. She's already seemed to take a liking to you too. 1 I looked over to 𝗂𝐽 who was holding her and then looked down at Hana to see her looking at me with a big smile. I held my arms out for me to grab her and she came over to me and I sat her on my hip. Do you want to stay with me and 𝗂𝐽? I asked her. 1 She quickly nodded and smiled even bigger if that was possible. I softly smiled and giggled a bit. 1 Then I guess we're taking care of her. I smiled proudly at my mom. I looked over to 𝗂𝐽 and he sighed and put his arm around my waist and kissed me on the cheek. 4 You look like a married couple. My mom laughed. 3 Heat rose to my cheeks and I could feel 𝗂𝐽 smirking beside me. We do, don't we? He said and smirked wider. 2 I quickly got out of his grasp, still red as a tomato. How about we go get some food? I'm sure Hana is starving. I looked over to her and she nodded. 3 The others agreed, so we found Mitsuki and all drove in her car to a random fast food place. My mom and Mitsuki sat at a different table to talk in private while me, 𝗂𝐽, and Hana all sat in a booth together. 1 We talked and laughed and had the most fun I think all of us have had in a long time. Then I thought of something. Hana, she turned to look at me, do you know when your birthday is? I asked. She shook her head. No. Well then, do you know where your house is? This time she nodded. Down the road. How about after we leave here we can go by your house and get your stuff? I looked over to 𝗂𝐽 and he nodded in agreement. Okay. She smiled. 22 For the rest of the time we just ate and talked until we got to her house. That one. She pointed. I looked out the window towards the house and my mouth hung open. The house was a tiny shack held up by 2 wooden poles. There was a hole in the front of the shack that acted as a window. There was also a large opening where a door should have been. Inside you could see that there were 2 people sitting on what looked like thin blankets. The people looked starved and pale. I looked over to 𝗂𝐽. Maybe they gave her up because they couldn't take care of her. I said, almost crying. I looked at Hana and pointed towards the people. Are those your parents, Hana? She looked over to them and nodded sadly. 𝗂𝐽 glanced over at me and nodded. We got out of the car and I held Hana's hand as we walked up to her house. They saw us walking up and looked shocked to see Hana with us. Hello, I said. They gestured us to walk in. I sat across from them while Hana sat in my lap and 𝗂𝐽 stood beside me. Are you Hana's parents? Are you Hana's parents? I asked. The man nodded sadly and looked down along with the woman. Why did you leave her all alone, if I may ask? The man sighed heavily. We couldn't care for her, so we left her hoping someone would find her. And it looked like someone has. The man smiled at me, almost crying. We had hopes she could live a better life than she would if she stayed with us. Said the woman. Well then, we will gladly take her in. I smiled at them softly. If it's okay with you, we would like to take whatever belongs to her so she can have something until we can get her more stuff. 6. That's completely fine. Her mom stood up and went to a little box that was in the corner and handed it to us. This is a box of all her belongings. Thank you, I said nicely. Hana. Her mom said to get her attention and gestured her to come over to her. She bent down to Hana's level. Here. She unhooked a golden necklace from around her neck and hooked it around Hana's neck. I love you and I'm sorry to leave you. You will understand one day why we did this. She started to cry. Stay strong and never, ever, forget how much we love you. She hugged her daughter tightly and Hana hugged her back. Her dad also came over to them and hugged the both of them. I love you, Hana. They pulled away and Hana was crying. She turned to look at us and I had my arms out. She ran into my arms crying and I picked her up into my arms and held her as she cried. Thank you. Her parents said one last time before we turned and left. As we sat in the car leaving, I looked at the necklace her mom had given to Hana. It was a golden chain with a heart-shaped opal jewel. 5. We headed to my apartment and once we were there we all went inside and me, Kaken, and Hana went up to my room while Mitsuki and my mom talked in the living room. We played around in my room for a while until we had decided to go to the park. 3. I decided to change before we went so I put on green high-waisted jeans, a black off-the-shoulder top, and my black Converse. I looked into the box Hana's parents had given us to see if she had any more outfits and I found light pink overalls with a baby blue shirt. She also had some white tennis shoes. Once we were dressed we headed out. We got to the park and I started to play with Hana on the play set while Kaken watched. Hey Midoriya. I heard and I looked over towards where the voice came from and saw Kirishima. With him was Kaminari, Siro, Mina, Jiru, Momo, Uraraka, Tsu, Ida, and Todoroki. They walked over to us, while the guys went to Kaken while the girls came over to me and Hana. Mina bent down to Hana's level. Who's this cutie? This is Hana. Me and Kaken are now taking care of her. The girls let out a small gasp. Where's her parents? Uraraka asked. They couldn't take care of her so me and Kaken took her in. She's basically our daughter now. I blushed a little bit at the thought of it. Well, she's cute, Mina said and Hana giggled. Mina looked back towards her. We're matching, Hana said and held out a piece of her hair to show Mina. I guess we are. Mina laughed. Hana smiled excitedly. She grabbed Mina's hand and took her over to the play set to play with her. I giggled a bit but Mina didn't seem to mind. Me and the other girls sat in the grass and talked while they played. Soon enough the others came over and sat with us. Kaken of course sat beside me and wrapped his arm around my waist. After a couple minutes Mina and Hana came over and Hana sat in my lap while Mina sat beside Uraraka and Tsu. Have fun with Auntie Mina. I glanced over to see Mina's wide smile after hearing me say that and I gave her a small wink. Yes, I'm an auntie, Mina yelled and everyone laughed at her. 16. We had so much fun. Hana threw her hands in the air excitedly. 3. I giggled at her. I looked at her and thought of something I haven't asked yet. Hana, do you have a quirk? She nodded excitedly and stood up in the middle of our little circle. I think it was called Animal. She proceeded to focus and after a few moments she transformed into a small white kitten. Wow! I was astounded. She's only 4 and knows how to control some of her quirk. She walked around the group, ended up in Kaken's lap where she transformed back into her normal self. Good job, said Kaken and he rubbed her head. She smiled and leaned into the feeling. Oh, I can also do this. She stood up once again and suddenly light pink cat ears and a tail appeared. Oh, she's so kawaii. Uraraka squealed. Come here. I smiled and held my arms out and she ran over and I hugged her tightly and giggled. I leaned back a little and I fell over onto my back and everyone laughed including me. Hana was now laying on my chest. I carefully sat back up and turned her around to sit in my lap. Though that didn't last long because she just got right back up and went over to Kaken to sit in his lap. I smiled. Grabbing Kaken's hand, I laid my head on his shoulder. You 3 look like a little family, Momo said. 2, I guess we do, don't we? I guess we do, don't we? I smiled. I looked up 𝗵𝗃 to see him smirking, knowing I had copied his words from earlier. We all talked for a while until I heard soft snores coming from beside me. I looked over and say that Hana has fallen asleep in 𝗵𝗃's arms. 2. I guess that's our signal to go home. I yawned. It's been a long day. That's okay, Mina said. We all know the king and queen need their beauty rest. We laughed. Yeah, how else am I supposed to keep up this handsome face? 𝗵𝗃 said, and everyone laughed harder. 5. Try again, buddy. Kaminari laughed. Well, I think you're very handsome. I smiled and gave him a peck on the lips. Get a room, you two. Siro said, and we laughed again. For we said our goodbyes and started to walk home. 𝗵𝗃 was carrying her with one arm while holding my hand with his other. 1. I think I'm gonna quit you, I said suddenly. But it's been your dream ever since we were little. He said, surprised. Yeah, but now I have a new dream. I stopped and turned to look at him. It's to take care of this family. I smiled. 5. He sighed, and we started walking again. Well then, what are you planning to do now? 2. I think I'm gonna drop out and take online school to take care of Hana. Then once we're done with school, I want to open my own business. I smiled, thinking about it. What kind of business? He asked, and I thought for a moment. Maybe a cafe of some sorts. 5. That would be amazing. 1. We had finally made it back to my place, and Mitsuki had already left, so it was just my mom in the living room watching TV. When we walked in, she turned and greeted us. How was the park? She asked. It was really fun. We saw some of our friends there. I said. 𝗵𝗃 went upstairs with Hana to put her to bed, and I talked to my mom for a couple minutes about dropping out of UA and transferring to regular homeschool. She thankfully agreed, and I went upstairs to join Hana and 𝗵𝗃. He was sitting in my chair on his phone when I walked in. 1. When he saw me, he stood up and walked over to me and put his hands on my hips. I returned the gesture by putting my arms around his neck. He slowly leaned in until our lips were connected. Our lips moved in sync. Eventually, I was up against the wall with one of his hands beside my head while the other was still on my hip. 19. I pulled him closer to deepen the kiss, and he pressed his leg up in between my thighs. I softly into the kiss. 2. What are you doing? I heard, and we looked over to see Hana awake looking at us. 39. I gently pushed 𝗵𝗃 away and walked over and sat on the bed beside her. Nothing, sweetie. 1. Wate. She replied. 2. After that, we laid down with her and fell right asleep. Izuku's POV. The next day, I woke up to my alarm from my phone. I checked the time, and we had an hour before we had to be at the school. I quickly got up to get ready and woke up 𝗵𝗃 and Hana. 𝗵𝗃 got ready in his school uniform while I decided to just put on regular clothes. I wore dark blue jeans, a black top, and a green cardigan with my Converse. I put Hana in what she was wearing yesterday and decided I would take her to get new clothes and stuff today. 3. We started walking to the school together. I was carrying Hana this time while holding 𝗵𝗃's hand. When we got to the school, 𝗵𝗃 gave me a quick kiss and headed off to class while I headed to the office. I knocked on the door and waited for a response. Come in. I heard Principal 𝗧𝗍 say. I opened the door and walked in with Hana in my arms. Izuku Midoriya. What a surprise. 𝗧𝗍 said. I nodded with a smile. I looked over and saw that All Might was also in there. Good morning to the both of you. I took a seat in the chair next to All Might. And who is this, if I may ask? He gestured to Hana, who was now sitting in my lap. This is Hana. I paused for a moment. My daughter. 1. They sat there surprised at the words that had just come out of my mouth. Ever since I became a girl, I have been quirkless. They stared at me in shock. What? All Might said, you can't be serious. 6. I am, sadly. And after that, everything in my life has gone downhill. After everything I've been through, I've come to the conclusion that I'm leaving UA. But, All Might paused, trying to gather his thoughts. I thought it was your dream to become a hero. But now I have a new dream. I looked down at Hana and smiled. I completely support your decision. Principal 𝗧𝗍 spoke up. I smiled at him and looked over to All Might. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to find a new successor. He sighed and nodded understanding. 3. We talked for a while after about transferring me to regular online school. After we were done, I walked out of the office. I realized they were switching classes, so I hurried and tried to leave so I wouldn't be in anyone's way. That was until I heard someone say my name. Izuku Midoriya. I looked back to see who it was, and it was Monoma. Where's your little boyfriend? So, is that your daughter? Is that why you've been gone for so long? You little where? He just kept throwing insults my way. 70. I was about to cry. I finally gathered up the strength and walked away holding Hana in my arms. Hey, don't turn your back on me. When I didn't look back, I just kept walking. I left without saying a word. I almost cried, but I held back my tears for Hana's sake. We walked away from the school and went to the shopping district. I needed to get her more clothes and everything else she needed. We stayed there for hours picking out clothes and stuff. But mostly clothes. After a while we checked out and headed back home. In our apartment we had a small extra room, so I decided we would fix it up for Hana so she could have her own little room. There was already a twin-size bed, a shelf, and a drawer in there, so we didn't really need to worry about furniture. The room was a lilac color, so we wouldn't paint it either. I started putting Hana's clothes away while she played with some of the toys I got her. After I finished, me and Hana went into the kitchen to make something to eat since we haven't eaten today. 3. Hana wanted to help me, so I sat her on the counter while I started cooking. It was already lunchtime, so I made us some grilled cheese sandwiches and some frozen fries we had in the freezer. For after eating we decided to go out for ice cream and go to the park. Hana had gotten strawberry and I got mint chocolate chip. 8. We started walking to the park, and this time she was just holding my hand while eating her ice cream. When we got there we were already done with our ice cream, so we threw away the napkins and stuff by the entrance to the park. We played for a while until I saw 𝗂𝐿 walking into the park. I had left him a note at the apartment that we would be here, and he had changed into ripped black jeans and an orange tank top with his Converse. I waved towards him and he started walking over to us. Hana, however, took off running towards him, and when she reached him he picked her up and swung her around a bit until he put her on his hip. Once he reached me, he put his hand on my hip and gave me a quick kiss. "School's lonely without you," he said. 6. I put my hand on his cheek. "I know, baby, and I'm sorry, but there's no place for me in that school anymore." "I know." He leaned down to my ear. "That just means I'll be getting a special treat tonight." He nibbled at my ear gently. 12. I quickly became flustered and pulled away and smacked him on his arm. What?" he joked. Hana just looked confused while all this was happening. 7. After a while we went home, and when we walked in I saw my mom on the couch watching TV. 3. I walked over behind the couch she was sitting on and saw that was watching the news. Then something caught my attention. "Turn it up," I said, and she turned up the volume a bit. "A couple found dead in their home just last night. The autopsy came back and the cause of death: starvation." They showed the couple on screen, and what I saw made me want to cry. It was Hana's parents. To mommy. Daddy. I quickly turned to see Hana looking at the screen with tears now running down her cheeks. 𝗂𝐿 had the same surprised face as me. I quickly walked over to them and took Hana from him and went upstairs while he followed. I sat on my bed with Hana in my lap turned towards me and tried to calm her down. "Hey, it's okay." I wiped her tears from her face. "They're in a better place now." My voice cracked. 5. I felt my vision blur and the tears rolling down the side of my face. I hugged her and we both cried together. 𝗂𝐿 put his arm around me and I leaned into his shoulder. Soon enough Hana had fallen asleep in my arms from crying so much. 𝗂𝐿 had taken her from my arms and went to put her to bed. I was still crying tough, just not as much as I was. Once he returned, he lay down on the bed and made me lay with him while I cried. Crying into his chest, he rubbed my back calmingly. Eventually I was just like Hana and passed out from crying so much. I was woken up in the middle of the night by being shaken. I looked over to see Hana with tears in her eyes. I sat up and picked her up and sat her up there with me. "Hey, what's wrong?" I asked her. I had a nightmare." She cried. "Do you want to sleep with us?" She nodded her head, so I laid her down in between us and I felt 𝗂𝐿 put his arm around us protectively. Soon enough we fell back asleep. I was woken up again by my alarm this time. I quickly turned off the ear-aching noise and woke up 𝗂𝐻𝐁 and Hannah. However, Hannah apparently didn't feel like getting up today. So I picked her up and brought her into the kitchen to make her a small breakfast. I decided to just make her some eggs and toast, and I also made 𝗂𝐻𝐁 and myself some. We sat and ate in silence. Once we were done, I took Hannah to her room to get ready. I put her in a soft yellow dress and some tan boots. I also put her pink hair in space buns. On the other hand, I wore a light blue jean skirt with a long sleeve yellow top with the same kind of boots Hannah was wearing, but mine had a bit more of a heel to it. Once we were done getting ready, we headed out. We walked 𝗂𝐻𝐁 to UA first. He gave me a quick kiss and headed into the school. Next, I had to take Hannah to the regular school to get her enrolled into kindergarten. It wasn't a long walk from UA to the school. Once we made it there, we walked into the office and went to talk to the principal. Izuku's POV. I walked into the principal's office and talked to him about enrolling Hannah into kindergarten. It didn't take that long to get her enrolled into the school. The principal said she could start tomorrow. Right when we were walking out of the office, I realized the kids were changing classes. The halls quickly became filled with the children, so me and Hannah waited at the doorway by the office to leave. Some of the kids saw Hannah with me and started whispering amongst themselves. Some of them waved at Hannah and she smiled and waved back. Once the halls were clear, we walked out of the school and walked to the park. When we got there, Hannah immediately ran to the play set and started going down the slides. I was walking over there to play with her when I got this sinking feeling that we were being watched. I looked around carefully but saw nothing, so I tried to shake off the feeling, but it didn't go away. I started getting nervous, and about 10 minutes later I grabbed Hannah and we quickly walked home. I couldn't shake the feeling something bad was gonna happen. We walked into the door of the apartment and sat on the couch while I turned on the news. Breaking news: villain 𝗕𝗏 has escaped from prison. Police and pro-heroes have not been able to capture her yet. Be sure to be on the lookout. We hope for everyone to stay safe. Immediately when I heard that, I started freaking out. She's gonna come after me. I just know it. Just then I hear noises coming from my room. It sounded like things were being shifted around. I run to the kitchen and grab a knife, leaving Hannah in the living room. Slowly I walk towards the room, knife in hand. I reach the door and press my ear up against it, only to hear silence. I slowly and carefully open the door but see nothing. Looking around the room, I heard noises coming from the living room. Hannah! I say under my breath and break into a run. Nothing. The room was empty and Hannah was nowhere to be seen. I started looking everywhere around the house, but I couldn't find her. Immediately I called the police to try and find her. The minutes passed and finally the police arrived. They started investigating while I called 𝗂𝐻𝐁 crying and told him what had happened. Thankfully he was at lunch so he could answer. What? He yelled through the phone. I can't find her anywhere. I said, sobbing. Toga escaped and I have a feeling it might be her that took Hannah. As soon as 𝗂𝐻𝐁 got home, I ran to him and cried into his chest, and he quickly wrapped his arms around me tightly. Have they found anything? He asked in a soft voice. Not yet. I sobbed. I heard footsteps walking towards us and I pulled back to look behind me, and I saw one of the officers walking towards us. We found this inside the couch, he said, and held up a folded piece of paper and handed it to me. Dear Izuku, Hannah is now mine. If you want her back, give yourself to me. You should know who I am. I'll be waiting. If you're willing to give yourself up, meet me tomorrow at midnight at the old villain base. The same place you almost died by my hands. And come alone. I finished reading the note and sobbed even more. My legs went numb and I fell to my knees and sobbed. I know what you're thinking. 𝗂𝐻𝐁 was now on the ground with me, hugging me. You're not going. I have to, I said in between sobs. Look at me. He pulled my face to look at him. I'm not losing you again. I can't. He said, his voice cracking, about to cry. I didn't answer. Instead I fell into his chest and cried. I couldn't promise I wouldn't go, and he knew that, so he didn't say anything, instead just held me in his arms. We stayed there for what seemed like forever. After the police left, they set out an investigation and apparently set up police around the old villain base. That night all I did was cry while 𝗂𝐻𝐁 held me, but eventually I fell asleep from crying so much. The next day I woke up to blinding light in my face. But I wasn't in my home. I was in the hospital. What happened? Why was I here? I looked carefully around the room and felt a sharp pain in my neck. I inhaled sharply. Just then the door opened and I saw 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗲 walking in with a doctor. When they saw me they looked surprised that I was awake. 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗲 ran over and kneeled beside my bed and held my hand tightly. What happened? I asked, trying to gather breath. You mean you don't remember? Finally the doctor spoke up. Unfortunately she has had a bit of memory loss. Tell me, what's the last thing you remember? Hana. She was taken by 𝗃𝗏. That night. The last thing I remember. I thought for a second. It was me crying and then falling asleep. That means dash. He stopped in the middle of his sentence. He stood up and walked out of the room and moments later came back in with someone. A little girl. She's okay. My eyes widened in surprise. Hana. I mumbled. I felt my vision start to go blurry and tears rolled down my cheeks. Hana ran over to me and jumped on the bed and wiped my tears away with her finger. Don't cry, mommy. Don't cry, mommy. Hana said while wiping my tears away. I slightly gasped. Mommy. Even so I smiled and cried more. Holding my arms out she jumped into them and I held her. Once we finally let go I turned to 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗲. So, what happened? He sighed. Flashback: I woke up in the middle of the night, sweat dripping down my forehead and tears running down my cheeks. I remembered. Hana. I ran to go look in her room and she was gone. So it was true after all. I threw on my shoes and coat and ran out the door and onto the streets. I had no clue where I was going. But I couldn't stop. After minutes of sprinting down sidewalks and up streets I was finally out of breath and stopped to look around at where I was at. I was in front of a convenience store blocks away from the apartment. I dug through my jacket's pockets and found a couple of crumpled dollars. Walking down the aisles of the store I grabbed myself a bottle of water to see if I could calm myself down. As I paid and started walking out of the store I heard a shrill cry. I followed where it was coming from and it led me into a dark alley down the street. I peeked around the corner and saw a very large man cornering a little girl. Hey! I yelled and the man slowly turned around towards me. Get away from her. That's when I blacked out. Flashback over, the man had hit you over the head and I'm guessing some passerby saw and called the police. He continued, the one you had saved was actually Hana. She was taken by 𝗃𝗏 but she was able to transform into a small animal and was able to get away, and that's when you found her. 3. I was astonished. Looking over towards Hana, she had a big smile on her face. I reached out towards her and embraced her in a hug. I had tears running down my cheeks. I'm so glad you're okay. I cried. For the next couple hours we talked and laughed. I had to stay in the hospital for a couple days until I could leave. 9. Over the next few days there was only laughs and happiness. No pain and sorrow, and I enjoyed every moment of it. Some of our friends came to visit us like Mina, Kirishima, Kaminari, Siro, Todoroki, Uraraka, Ida, and 𝗬𝗏. Right now Mina was playing with Hana while the girls were talking to me and the guys were talking to 𝐭𝐻𝗵𝗲. It was hours before I would be released and I was excited. I was sitting on my bed with my legs crossed talking to the girls and laughing. We had decided that once I was released we would all go out to dinner to celebrate. 1 hour later I was checked out of the hospital by my mom and now was just happiness. I'm freaking out. What if he doesn't like it? I looked at myself in the mirror. My green hair was up in a low bun with a white flower crown on the top of my head that was attached to my long, flowy veil. I had appealing natural makeup on. Around my neck hung a diamond necklace and I had diamond earrings. My dress was long with a flowy skirt and the top half of it was white and flower designs going down to the skirt and my sleeves were lace. 10. Honey, he will love it. Mina, my maid of honor, tried to calm me down. My nerves were shot. Today was the day of my wedding and I was so nervous I was shaking. It was almost time for everyone to start going out and Mina was helping me with the finishing touches. 2. Mina was my maid of honor and my other bridesmaids were Uraraka, Momo, and 𝗬𝗏. The best man was Todoroki and the other groomsmen were Kirishima, Kaminari, and Siro. My mom was walking me down the aisle since, well, you know. 22. I heard a knock on the door and my mom peeked her head at the room. It's time. she said and smiled. She closed the door and I was about to cry. I was so nervous. Taking a couple of deep breaths, I grabbed my green bouquet of flowers and walked out of the room with Mina. We were now in the hallway before we would finally walk out. Then the music started. The bridesmaids and groomsmen started to walk out and then it was Mina's turn. Our ring bearer was Ida and the flower girl was Hannah. They walked out next. Then it was my turn. You ready? My mom asked, hooking my arm with hers. Ready as I'll ever be. 38 The doors opened and I saw Kakin at the altar. When I saw him my eyes started tearing up. As we walked down the aisle I could see him getting tears in his eyes. He covered his mouth and turned a little to the side and then turned back. I heard him sniff a little and he put his hands back in front of him. Once I reached the altar I turned towards him and we joined hands and the music died down until it was no longer there. Then it started. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the presence of these witnesses, to join Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo in matrimony commended to be honorable among all, and therefore is not to be entered into lightly but reverently, passionately, lovingly and solemnly. Into this, these two persons present now come to be joined. If any person can show just cause why they may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Kakin let go of one of my hands and held it for everyone to see and it started sparking with tiny explosions. It made everyone including me laugh. That's what I thought. He mumbled and everyone laughed again. We joined hands once again and then it was time for the vows. We had decided to write our own and Kakin started. 5. I, Katsuki, take you, Izuku, to be my wife. I promise to always be your biggest fan and your partner in crime. I promise to create and support a family with you, in a household filled with laughter, patience, understanding and love. I vow not just to grow old together, but to grow together. I will love you faithfully through the difficult and the easy. What may come, I will always be there, each one believing that love never dies. As I have given you my hand to hold, so I give you my life to keep. He finished. 13 I started to cry at the words and it looks like he was crying too. Then it was my turn. I got choked up on my words but I made it through. I love you unconditionally and without hesitation. I vow to love you, encourage you, trust you, and respect you. As a family, we will create a home filled with learning, laughter, and compassion. I promise to work with you to foster and cherish a relationship of equality, knowing that together we will build a life far better than either of us could imagine alone. Today, I choose you to be my husband. I accept you as you are, and I offer myself in return. I will care for you, stand beside you, and share with you all of life's adversities and all of its joys from this day forward, and all the days of my life. 6 He started tearing up at my words and they rolled down his cheeks. We put the rings on each other's fingers and then came the last part. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. He grabbed me by the waist and dipped me into a kiss. When we came back up I giggled. He picked me up bridal style and walked back down the aisle while everyone started clapping. 5 years later 6, Kyoko, come back here. I yelled at my 3-year-old running but naked away from me. 13 I was changing hers and Kiyomi's clothes since they decided to run outside while it was pouring rain. Next thing I know they're both running away from me but naked. Hannah, can you come help me? I yelled for my 9-year-old. Sure, Mom. She replied and ran down the stairs and saw the situation. Oh. She ran for Kiyomi while I ran for Kyoko. After minutes of running around the house we finally caught them and I was able to get them changed into their pajamas with Hannah helping me. They wore strawberry onesies with little white socks. They were fraternal twins so they weren't identical. Kiyomi had blonde, curly hair with a single streak of green in it with green eyes while Kyoko had green, curly hair with a single streak of blonde in it with red eyes. Just when I had finished changing them I heard the door open and then close. Kakin was home. I carried the twins in my arms to go and greet him and Hannah had already beaten us to him. He had her in his arms laughing and giggling. When he saw me he smiled. I walked over to him and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. He also kissed either of the twins on the head and they giggled. How was work? I asked. Same as always. Didn't really have anyone to catch today. Well, number 1 hero, Why don't you come help me make dinner? Of course. He put Hana down and followed me to the kitchen. We were making spaghetti. While the noodles started to cook, Kaken grabbed my hips and I wrapped my arms around his neck. Leaning in, I began to close my eyes, as did he. It was slow and sweet. His kiss tasted like heaven. For after a minute we pulled apart to catch our breath. "2, you have no idea how much I love you," she said to me. "And I love you too," I replied and smiled. This is the life I have chosen to live and I couldn't be any more happier with it.